Namo Tassa. In this video, I will talk about the relationship with teacher in some ways, or the concerns around what is called a teacher or master or guru. That was inspired by a video, so I will put the link of that video from that same YouTube channel, which is quite good and informative on many aspects of Buddhism, and not only Theravada but the other ones. And today's video actually was again comparing, especially with Vajrayana, basically the Tibetan Buddhism. And I was thinking of making a video of the other main part of what Vajrayana is known for, which is the deeper teachings that can go very far in mental capacities, as basically we know that ultimately those Tibetan monks in some ways are usually the ones that are very known for supernatural or extraordinary capacities for a reason, if they can master those deeper teachings. And at the same time, many people like to compare Vajrayana with Mahayana and Theravada, but I found that actually there's not such comparison actually. So at the same time, they speak, I think, about the two aspects under this umbrella of Vajrayana in this video. And I want to make actually two separate videos about that, because I think it's more clear for people. And one is more about a common topic, which is about that what is a teacher and the relationship with the teacher or master or guru. And the other part is exactly more specifically about Vajrayana teachings, and sometimes what people think are the differences, but maybe from misunderstanding between what is Theravada really or what it is at a deeper level when you reach higher levels, or compared to the Vajrayana teachings, which supposedly maybe claim to be more direct, accelerate path to higher level. Anyway, for this one, I will talk about the relationship and maybe the meaning of what is a real teacher or master or guru, whatever the word. And then I will actually mostly read what I have written down to explain what I mean about that. So I mentioned, of course, some things about that before, exactly also because I have my good friend Bhikkhu Ashin Chanda, who also likes to post a few things about that, both ways, as far as how people behave towards teachers, especially nowadays, the new generation, when they mean to want to learn Dhamma or know about Dhamma, but actually they definitely don't have as much respect for the teachers as before. And that's a conversation I had with another friend who is a teacher at school in Myanmar, but also confirmed that about the evolution of mentalities and the new generation. And I explain, of course, it follows the agenda that is again meant to increase the ego of the people, right? Atta is becoming bigger and bigger, more ego that goes together with more ignorance, more avijja, more moha and more atta, ego. But then that makes those people, especially the young people, think they know better and think they like to challenge or debate or argue with teachers. But of course, that doesn't help much, and it's just what happens now, and it's very different from the good old days, as we say, where there was more structure with that, and it was working better actually, and with more logic basically, and it was leading to better outcomes. When nowadays everything has no rule and it's just a big mess, of course. So the 2 points are that you need, of course, basically the right kind of teacher, and that means, of course, the one who has the proper knowledge, which means exactly one who has the experience in practice. Unfortunately, and as many people do, they will go to the monastery, the temple, and they listen to the head monk, Sayadaw, and many Sayados as such, with the title, they are literate. They know the scriptures, they have learned, they have studied, and they can repeat very well. And of course, a lot of Dhamma can be understood intellectually in a good way, and so can be repeated in a good way. Yet, that doesn't make somebody a really good teacher, and that's exactly what's happening. And also why some people mention that compared to me, because they are used to the classic speeches from those monks, head monks, Sayadaws, or teachers in Asian culture, Buddhist culture, but they usually speak the same way because it relates to the scriptures that they have learned by heart, many of them, and so they can repeat the similar ways. And that's what people say. We always hear the same thing, and they repeat the same thing everywhere, every time. And of course, for me, I do it in a way that I like, which is to be more organic, in the sense that it's mostly based from experience. And so I adapt it to the situation and the people at the same time. I try as much as I can. So, and then I present it in different ways, also because I come from different culture, and I've explained before also my point around that, how culture frames or format the way people think and the way people speak about things. So sometimes my way to explain things is a bit fresh, because it's or refreshing, because it's a bit different than the classic Asian country and Buddhist way. So that's the way. But you have to find then that culture with the right competence in a way of proper knowledge, which means from practice and not only the theory, not the scriptures. And also a real teacher in a way of ethics also. And we have some situations sometime where, unfortunately, of course, some teachers feel very proud, let's say, and the ego get really emphasized from the position of being, venerated in some ways, respected at least, because of the title. But then the ego, atta, becomes a bit big, and then they easily take advantage of that situation, either materially or mentally, towards the people. So they like to feel that they are put in a superior position, and they like to easily demand things from people, but also then it goes to some situation of abuse in and some cases have been reported, physical abuse, mental abuse. I've seen some video where a monk, not really old, maybe middle-aged or younger, was actually beating up another younger monk. He was literally beating up the other one in the middle of the room in a monastery. How does that can happen if you are supposedly Buddhist? So the point around that, of course, is trying to find the proper kind of teacher, the right kind of teacher, master, guru. Master means actually about the real aspect of someone who master what they talk about, master the knowledge, and again, from proper, real, serious experience. And that came in the video because in Vajrayana, Tibetan Buddhism, this is very, very important. And this is the first rule, that the student must become totally dependent on the teacher and must accept the teachings as they are given. And there is what they call the teacher's empowerment towards the student to start with. And then after that, unfortunately, there have been some situations that were not so nice. So that is to say that you have to be careful and not to go to one of those so many's who pretend to know exactly because they know the theory or they know the scriptures, right? And so a proper teacher like that has been through a lot, supposedly, from experience, so he will know the traps also. And that is the point, which is to know the pitfalls on the path and what you can fall in. So that person wants to be the proper guide for you, even though you will have to learn certain specific things that may not be present exactly to get the experience, to know also for yourself. But at the same time, the point is exactly that meditation sometimes can get you really deeper or to certain level or certain experiences that can be confusing or disturbing to some. And again, you need the proper teacher to know what's happening, to know you, and to avoid that you get too much entangled in that and spiral down, basically, and to make things become worse. But at the same time, the logic of the situation means that ultimately a real teacher is an advanced one who you will surrender to, actually. In the way that, as I mentioned before in other video, with that expression they use in Zen in Japan, that you accept that to have the beginner mind means that you understand that you don't know yourself so much, and actually accept that idea, which most people don't accept, exactly also because of the regular ego, that this teacher actually can know you better than you know yourself, and also as such is able to read your mind and your psychological points and characteristics, and also then the pitfalls in your own minds. And so with that, he will know where to point you and guide you. But as I meant, in a way that also the practice doesn't become something dangerous for yourself. But instead, the point is to manage to help you go through the stages and so that you can progress and rather, of course, get the benefits of surrendering to the teachings and the path. But as I meant, of course, the other part, unfortunately, is exactly the problem that nowadays, with so many people having access to information easily, as meant before, of course, online, can access to any scriptures, any old scriptures, and any teachings and any versions, and also the ego-based mind, which has greed, not to mention dosa, the hatred side or angry side, but only by pure greed. Of course, you have so many charlatan, like fake gurus, many of them in normal clothes, but who will be very eloquent and can appear appealing or have the charisma or have the right marketing pitch online on their website or in videos or whatever. And they will claim to know psychology itself or meditation, but actually, ultimately, what they will teach you will make you more messy. And ultimately, to the point that, as it has happened in many cases, you will actually need to go to serious therapy because of that. And there are too many charlatan, pretending teachers, guru around who claim to know about meditation especially. And unfortunately, classically, this is not uncommon in Buddhism, because of course some pretend or are granted some title, then again in robes, in whatever official uniform they have or they create themselves sometime, but they remain regular humans. That means they still, of course, are controlled by a weaker mind with the classic aspect of ignorance, of course, as a base, and moha, lobha, dosa, which are delusion and greed and anger, hatred. So those people, unfortunately, as regular human, they cannot help but fall into the trap of abusing or taking advantage of others. Exactly. what is the classic ego-based mind. And usually that's for the sake of business or money, but also taking physical and mental advantage of some people. So this is only to emphasize, as much as it's not easy to really find a proper, serious, advanced teacher, but you will have to try to make up some criteria or maybe some observation. Of course, sometime online people post reviews, but again, there is so much around about that. But actually, those very serious, advanced teachers, there are not so many of those around in the world, actually. People who have reached a really very advanced level, and at the same time who have the real foundational ethics at the base, which is solid. So they have the very strong mind and very clear mind to not fall in the classic pitfalls of a position of authority or control or power over others, and then cannot help but fall into abusing that. But those are the people who really have, in mind your progress on the path, so that one day you actually don't need a teacher or a master anymore. Of course, that's the point. And then you can just keep going on your own. Then it means that you had a good teacher in that sense. But also the video reminds you that both ways, a guru is not a shortcut around the work that you need to do. Remember one of the basic quotes in Buddhism: you have to do your own work for your own salvation. Nobody else can do the work for you. So again, if you come with that mentality of a bit arrogance and ignorance, and with a mindset that says, okay, you're a guru, you're a master, make me enlightened, and especially with the money, right, the kind of pressure situation, what if I give you so much money, can you make me enlightened so quick? Well, this is not going to work, and it's totally the opposite of the path, of course. So don't come to a guru with the expectation that he is going to do it for you. You have to do the whole work yourself. Is only a guide again. That's why I always like to use the word guide, actually, compared to all that teacher, guru, master. But I like the word guide, and that's what you truly are. But at the same time, unfortunately, we see too much also around those charlatan gurus, teachers, pretending teachers, in real or online, who will advertise that claim that they will help you to get there, like a guarantee that you will reach the highest level, and basically they will make you enlightened. And that's the problem again, as we said before, that this word enlightenment has been abused a lot nowadays, again because it sounds cool and it's a good marketing argument. So unfortunately, you will find around a lot of people mentioning that as an advertisement, marketing, that they will get you very far, very quick, if you pay the right amount of money most of the time. So there's a lot of that unfortunately around, and that should be a sign, of course. Even some very, very famous spiritual teachers, as you can call them, of course, and they call themselves, and they are very popular. They have many books out there. Millions and millions of people follow them. Actually, some are very famous, but they still advertise some of their retreats like that. It's kind of course, strange, let's say, to claim to know Buddhism, to be humble, but at the same time to put the word enlightenment in the advertisement of your retreats that people pay a high price for. Or like a weekend retreat and get on a train to enlightenment or something like this. Anyway. And of course, that's always why I also appreciate the traditional ways. That is that you should have direct instruction from the teacher and not just like spreadsheets of words or like, the scriptures, even if they came up with original teachings, scriptures, but just read this or read this book or read my book, and then that will get you there. And some people think it's enough, of course, just to read. But as it is known, and at the same time, what should be is that there is a close relationship based on trust. And as mentioned before, the student should have this in a way that sometimes it doesn't understand what is meant or what's the point or the goal of what the teacher is saying. But that is the point. Again, and why you are a student is because you don't know yet enough. And as said before, especially in Buddhism, you also don't really know yourself anyway. And you have just to have that trust towards that real master or real teacher, that he will know you enough and knows you better than yourself, and then he knows what is beneficial for you, even if it doesn't really make sense to you sometimes. That is that situation that can be a bit tricky or a bit scary to some, but that's just part of it. That's why, everything is karma also, but it's your karma if you fall for the right kind of teacher or not. But at the end, there is a surrender there too, and you have to trust that way. That this person may know you better than yourself, of course, and also then sometimes the way they teach is in a way that you don't understand, but you just have to accept it that way. And that's why I've remembered many situations like that before, and again it shows the people who are not ready in that sense. Readiness is of course the big thing, but people realize that they have issues, they want to admit, to make their ego feel like humble, and they say, yes, I want to improve, I want to become a better person, I know that I don't know enough myself, so I want to then they try different things and they still have the same issues. Then they decide, okay, I need to find a teacher, or I'm going to that teacher, and then they come to this teacher, can be a good teacher, and then they tell them to do this and this and this, and then the students start to argue about the teachings and say, no, this doesn't work for me, this is not the way it works for me. So there is that classic issue, as I mentioned before, nowadays, big egos. So unfortunately, that happens too many times, and that's a classic. And that shows that that person is not ready and still too much caught up in ego that thinks it knows better, and that's why the patterns will keep repeating, but they're not going to improve, of course, because they are not ready to change, because they think they know how it should be, and they don't want to listen to anything different than what the mind conceive anyway. So this is not ready to change and to progress and to be a student anyway. This is no beginner's mind, of course. But so because of that kind of surrendering to the teacher, we see at once the potentially dangerous aspect of that with the fake teachers, which are unfortunately too many, as I mentioned before. And I will give an example in compared to my situation as being enough aware, and what they mentioned also in that video, in a way of just actually many very good teachers look like ordinary people. They don't need to have the robes. I've met a few very good lay teachers, very advanced, Of course, people can be anagami also and still wear regular clothes. As it was known before, some people claim, of course, that in my lineage, Ubakin and Goenka or Sayamaji were anagami people, and they were not in robes. I don't think you stay arahat without wearing the robes. That makes sense at that point, but that's different for Ayanda. So in my situation, for example, I would say, and I, of course, be more like ordinary lay person, but then in some situations people, of course, they would look for more like for something special about a good teacher. And in many situations in my daily life, many ordinary activities, then actually there is a situation where I would actually decide to make the situation more challenging for myself, exactly because I want to keep practicing awareness, being present, and to keep increasing that, and both physically and mentally. And of course, some people don't really notice that, or they don't understand in some situation, because the normal way of thinking, exactly because the majority are controlled by the weaker mind in that sense, or the monkey mind, and so they like to make their life more convenient, more comfortable, and they like to find usually the easier or lazier way to get things done. So when they would witness me in those situations that are just very basic, ordinary situation, could be doing the dishes or whatever, making the bed, or walking in some areas, or creating something, or building, fixing something. But then they would notice that I would do it in a way that seems to be more challenging or more difficult. And that doesn't make sense for them. So then they would just really wonder what's happening, why I do that, why I choose the difficult option. And in some situation, they can't help but, feel like they need to help me. But they don't understand, of course, that, as I meant, I have more awareness than them, more life experience many times, exactly because I've put myself through many difficult or complicated or dangerous situation purposely to learn about life, to have more experience in life, and to become a better person or more intelligent that way. And that's done consciously, purposely. But of course, those people in general, they don't understand that. They don't see that because of the regular way the mind works. And it doesn't make sense anyway. But this is to practice skills and to improve skills also in life. And again, both mentally and physically, to have more awareness and to know more. The more knowledge you have, more experience, the better teacher you can become. So basically, this is the example of what makes a difference between the two categories of people and mindsets, and how you can guarantee yourself to constantly improve and progress in life, or you can keep decreasing your mental and physical capacities. And later on, of course, comes, as proven now by more and more studies, like senility and dementia and all these kind of ailments that are stepping in earlier or later. So this is again really the whole concept of the two opposite mindsets of people who make a point to want to become better person and more intelligent in their life and finish it with the most wisdom and with some peace of mind, or like the majority that likes to cruise along life, usually trying to choose the easier, lazier way. But usually for that kind of mindset, there's a price to pay at the end, as I meant. So you have to choose like that. So that's a little bit an extra part that I put at the end here compared to the main topic of teacher-student. But also what makes part of a student, well, there are many quotes around, some not exactly about teacher, but there was a quote around that says that the successful one in that sense is the person who has failed more times than you have even tried. And you can see successful people are the ones who don't complain and feel sorry for themselves when they meet challenges. Rather, they either enjoy challenges or they actually have the somewhat intelligence to create challenging situation for themselves to improve their skills, their adaptation, and strengthen the mind in that sense. And of course, a stronger mind that way is a key for success. Also in Buddhism, as there is this other famous quote about saying that the mind is a beautiful servant but a dangerous master. So you have to choose again how much you choose to control your mind and take over and develop a strong disciplined mind. Discipline is another word around that. Or you just again want to just go along the easier, lazier way, but then usually that means you will never really improve in your life, and it will stay the same until the end, which is what we see for the majority of people. And as far as Buddhism, of course, there is only one way to get really on the path and to progress on the path towards the goal, in that sense, which is to accept the challenges and to want to have some discipline, and again, just like what made a good teacher is to really practice seriously, to gain experience, not through words, but all about the practice.